Every second Tuesday of the month was always a bit hectic. That was the night my men's club met up for dinner and discussion at 6:30 p.m. My wife, Ayasha, and I usually got home around 5 or 5:30, which gave me just enough time to change clothes, grab my things, and get out the door. I never had to cook on those nights since dinner was included, but somehow, Ayasha always found something last minute for me to take care of before I left. Truth is, the real challenge wasn't time, it was tearing myself away from her. She was 3 months along with our first child, and between her glowing skin and unpredictable emotions, she looked more beautiful to me than ever. Ayasha stood about 5'3", barely weighed 110 pounds, with long ash-brown hair and eyes that could stop traffic. And it wasn't just her looks, it was her brain, her sense of humor, and her way of noticing the small things. I adored everything about her. Still, I needed to be out the door by 6:10 if I was going to make it to the meeting on time. So I hustled through a quick shower, threw on a decent pair of slacks and a collared shirt, and snatched my briefcase. As I walked through the kitchen toward the garage, I leaned in, gave Ayasha a kiss on the back of the neck, gave her a gentle squeeze, and made my way out. It crossed my mind to just skip the meeting, not only because I hated leaving her, but because I had a half-finished job waiting out in the garage. I had been installing a baby monitor system for the nursery, one that hooked up throughout the whole house. I figured I had about half an hour's worth of work left. She always lit up when I finished little projects like that, and I liked how proud she got of me. I climbed into my car, hit the garage door opener, and fired up the engine. With everything ready, my phone, notepad, calculator, I backed out into the driveway. I gave Ayasha a quick wave through the kitchen window. She waved back, and just as I was about to shift gears and drive off, my phone rang. I stopped and answered it. It was a guy from the club. Turned out the meeting was canceled. Our president, along with 2 of the other officers, had to leave town unexpectedly. Since there wasn't much on the agenda, they called it off. I let out a breath, reversed back into the garage, and closed the door behind me. Ayasha was no longer at the kitchen sink, probably already moved on to something else. Sitting in the driver's seat for a minute, I thought about dinner and figured I'd just order us a pizza. That would free me up to finish the monitor system before relaxing for the night. The nursery was almost done. The main camera had been mounted for over a week, and Ayasha hadn't even noticed it, small as it was, tucked neatly into the corner. I had even put in audio monitors in all the rooms, so no matter where I was, I could check on the baby. My garage had its own setup, a little TV and speaker system connected to everything. It had all come from parts a buddy gave me, nothing fancy, but it worked great. I decided to wrap it up before doing anything else. Got out of the car and got to work. Within about 20 minutes, all the speakers were running just as they should. When I tested the one from the living room, I could hear the water running upstairs. Ayasha was in the shower. The sensitivity was incredible, especially for a $12 speaker. I left the sound running to the garage and turned to finalize the video system. That was when I heard voices coming through the living room feed. Ayasha was talking. She said something like, "Edward, make sure you're here by 7. Then came a man's voice. "All right, love. I'll see you then. Don't be late. We are short on time already. And no, do not expect a rerun." She giggled. Then silence. I froze. Edward? The only Edward the first knew was Edward Longfeather, married to her best friend from college, Sonny. But surely, they were planning something together? Something innocent? I brushed it off and switched to the baby room camera. The spare bedroom came up clear on the monitor. The bed was made, which was odd since Ayasha only did that when we had company. I tested the zoom, panning across the whole space. Bed, window, closet, door. Everything but the far corner where the camera was. Figuring I was done for now, I grabbed a beer from the old fridge and kicked back in the recliner I had bought for the garage. She never let that thing inside the house. I was about to place the pizza order when I heard the doorbell ring. A minute later, Ayasha's voice echoed through the monitor. "There you are," she said with an edge in her tone. "We've got until 10:30. Until then, I'm all yours." She was using the same sultry voice I had only ever heard behind our closed bedroom door. The front door clicked shut. I sat there, beer halfway to my mouth, stunned. This could not be real. Then she laughed and said something about the bulge in his jeans. She told him it looked good. Then she told him to give her a proper hello. More laughter. Then grunting. And moaning. Then her voice saying, "Come on, it's already in the bedroom." My heart dropped. Were they heading into our bedroom? I nearly stood up right then and there. But some part of me told me to wait. To be sure. Then I saw it. The nursery monitor flickered to life. Ayasha opened the door and walked in, leading Edward by the hand. The bed was made just as I had seen. She led him to the window and turned to face the camera. She stood there, centered perfectly in the frame, wearing her old robe, the short one she used to wear on lazy Saturdays. She looked perfect. Hair in a soft bun, makeup subtle but stunning. On her feet were the birthday heels I had given her a year ago, the ones she had not worn since. With one hand, she clutched the front of her robe. The other began undoing the buttons, slow, teasing. When the last one popped loose, she used both hands to slide the robe open and let it fall. Underneath, she was wearing the red lingerie set I had bought her last Valentine's Day, the one she never wore again. She stood there, lips curled into a soft smile, and raised one hand to beckon him forward. Edward stepped closer, eyes wide. "Damn," he said. "I thought being with you tonight would be special, but this is something else. You're beautiful, Ayasha." Both of them undressed. Tears filled my eyes. I snapped out of it long enough to grab an empty memory card from the living room and slip it into the video recorder. I needed to record everything because no one would believe it otherwise. And because part of me still could not believe it either. They moved on to the bed, wrapped in each other, and what followed left a mark on me I'll never forget. From the way he touched her, from the way she responded, it was clear this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake. This was something more deliberate, more familiar. I paced back and forth in the garage, heart racing, fist clenched, trying not to let the storm building inside of me explode. I could not walk in there. If I did, it would end with someone getting hurt. Probably both of them. Then I heard her voice on the speaker. "Edward, you've got to go. William could walk in any second." That was my name. My wife was sending another man out of my house, like he was just visiting. I listened as she gathered his clothes and handed them to him. She picked up her lingerie, the same one I gave her for Valentine's Day, and laid it out neatly on the dresser. Without even waiting for Edward to finish dressing, she stripped the bed, bundled the sheets, and carried them to the laundry room. I knew that was her routine for when guests left. She came back into the living room where Edward was already bragging, tossing out the idea that maybe they should do this again sometime. She shut it down quickly. "It's a one-time thing," she said firmly, "just because of our deal." Edward didn't argue much. He agreed, but tossed in a half-joke about it being for old time's sake, saying that if she ever remembered how good it felt, they could pick it back up again. I heard them kiss one last time before his steps faded toward the front door. She followed him out, her voice softer now. Tired. Sad, maybe. She told him again, one time only, because of their agreement, that I was her husband, that she loved me, that she didn't know why she let it happen. She brought up Samantha, her best friend, Edward's wife, saying she mattered more than this mess. Then she asked him if he even still loved Samantha. I couldn't catch his answer. One last kiss. The front door closed. A click of the lock. And then, nothing. If I hadn't been too broken to laugh, I might have found the whole thing darkly funny. Edward's breathy little goodbye, after all that. The way she handled it like a routine chore. But there wasn't anything funny about it. A few minutes later, Ayasha came back into the spare room, the baby's room. I could not even think of it that way anymore. She straightened up what little was left out of place, grabbed her clothes, and disappeared into the hallway. I heard the shower running in our bedroom. Then the bed creaked. She was going to sleep like nothing happened. I sat there in that ratty recliner for a long time, just staring at the blank monitor, completely hollow. I checked the time. It was 10:37. They had wrapped it all up right on schedule. My mind spiraled. Was there something I had done to cause this? Had I ignored her? Failed to satisfy her somehow? I kept trying to make sense of something that had none. Eventually, close to midnight, I shut everything off and walked back into the house through the garage. As I passed the nursery, I peeked inside. The bed was stripped. Everything was clean. Nothing out of place. No sign of what had just happened. I made my way into our bedroom. Ayasha was already under the covers, sleeping or pretending to be. I went into the bathroom, brushed my teeth, stared at myself in the mirror. Then I stripped down and checked the laundry hamper. It was empty. No ruined lingerie. No evidence at all. As I crawled into bed, she rolled over and draped her arm over my chest. "How was your night?" she mumbled sleepily. After a long pause, I said, "Pretty traumatic, to be honest. I'll tell you more later." She usually snuggled into me, but not this time. She pulled her arm back and rolled over, facing away. Her breathing stayed steady, but I knew she was not asleep. Neither was I. I do not think I slept a wink. When the alarm went off, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, heavy with the weight of it all. I told her I felt sick and that I was staying home. She left for work around 8 a.m. I waited till I heard her car pull away before I got out of bed. Once she was gone, I went straight to her dresser. I searched carefully, not disturbing anything. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of sweaters, I found a folded paper bag. Inside was the lingerie she had worn for him. Damp. Wrecked. I called in sick to work. Then I replayed the tape from last night. At first, I could not even look. I skipped through it, only checking the audio and video quality. Later, though, I watched every minute. Caught small things I missed in the moment. I burned 2 copies. Made 2 calls. I skipped breakfast. Could not stomach a thing. Ayasha got home right on time for 30. When she came over to give me a kiss, I turned away. She looked at me, confused, maybe a little worried. By 5:30, I decided I could not hold it in anymore. This had to be addressed. Honey, I said, can you take a minute? I want to show you the nursery monitor system I've been working on. She smiled and said, let's do it after dinner. I was about to start cooking. I pulled out my phone. What sounds good? She shrugged. Maybe Chinese? I ordered it. Then I brought her into our bedroom. I showed her the sound setup first, walking into different rooms so she could hear how well it worked. She was impressed. She smiled as I went back and forth. Then I said, there's one more thing. I brought her into the garage. Told her I had something special in here, since I spent a lot of time working in this space. I plugged in the USB drive and turned on the small TV connected to the system. Watch the spare room, I said. The screen lit up. At first, it was empty. Then I used the remote to fast forward a bit. She saw herself, kneeling, with Edward. The color drained from her face. She staggered, one hand going to the wall to steady herself. She looked at me. I looked right back. I fast-forwarded again, just a few seconds, and paused it right where he was pulling at her underwear. She said something to him. The sound was muted, but we could both read lips. Then the video played again. The scream. The way he grabbed her. I watched her wince. I saw the tears come, silently falling. I stopped the video. You want to see more? I asked. She said nothing, just stared at me. I led her inside. We sat at the kitchen table. I need you to explain it, I said, my voice flat. Tell me what that was. Through her tears, she said she would try. I asked, what promise did you make to him back in college? How long have you owed him this? She took a deep breath, then began to talk. She said it was complicated, that they had dated a long time ago, that Edward was a flirt, slept around, even back then. She had started rooming with Samantha, and somehow the 3 of them all ended up tangled together. She said she needed to go back to the beginning. That night, after catching Hannah in the act and hearing her excuses, I needed answers. Real ones. So I sat her down and asked her to start from the beginning. She took a long breath and told me about a night back in college, about 6 years ago. She had been drinking with Edward, her old college friend, in her dorm room. Things got flirtier than usual. At some point during the night, she admitted to him that she was afraid of getting pregnant, and that was the main reason she had never taken things further with anyone. Edward, being Edward, expected any girl he was seeing to be on the pill. Hannah was not that kind of girl. But after a bit of back and forth and more drinks than she probably remembered, they argued about it. Eventually, she told him that if she could ever be sure she wouldn't get pregnant, she would sleep with him, just once. To prove her word, she wrote him a stupid little note. A promissory note, she called it, saying, basically, if the time ever comes when I can be sure I won't get pregnant, I'll sleep with you. I just sat there, stunned. You actually wrote that down? I asked. She nodded. Yeah, it was dumb. I thought it was a joke. That joke came back to life 2 weeks ago. That's when we announced to Edward and Samantha, his wife and Hannah's college roommate, that we were expecting our first baby. Apparently, not long after we broke the news, Samantha pulled Hannah aside and brought up the note. Hannah was stunned that Samantha even knew about it, and more stunned when she realized her friend was serious, that the note was, somehow, still owed. I had stepped out to grab a case of Dutch beer from the garage at the time. While I was out, Samantha brought it up again. And shockingly, Edward backed her up. According to Hannah, the pressure kept building. Drinks were flowing for hours. And somewhere in all of it, she gave in. By the time I came back with the beer, the plan was already in motion. Hannah had agreed to make good on her promise that same night. I sat there looking at her, trying to wrap my head around it all. So, who's the father of this baby? She broke. Tears came immediately. I swear it's yours, William, she sobbed. It was just that one time. I didn't say anything for a moment. I had more questions. Too many. How many other promises have you made and kept? She jumped up like I had slapped her. None. There's no one else, she cried. I love you, William. She dropped to her knees, face in her hands, pleading with me to believe her. After a pause, I asked if she would answer a few more questions. Truthfully, she said yes. So I asked, could you have said no to him? She sniffled, nodded. Yes, I could have. But I felt like I had to keep my word. Like it was about my honor. I stared at her, not even knowing who I was looking at anymore. It wasn't about cheating, she added. I didn't even know you back when I made that promise. And when I agreed to it again, I thought I owed him something, for being a good friend. I shook my head. So you were sober when you agreed to it now? She hesitated. Not really. I was drunk again. But, yeah, I sobered up later. And I still didn't back out. I pressed further. Were you looking forward to it? She lowered her gaze. Then, in a small voice, said, no. I mean, yes, kind of. But not the way you're thinking. She tried to explain that once she felt like she had no choice, she figured she might as well get through it the best way she could. She claimed it wasn't because I was not enough, but because she felt cornered by her own past. I asked if she remembered 6 weeks ago when I had called her from a work trip and suggested a weekend at the Holiday Inn in Atherton. She nodded and smiled a little. It was a good weekend. I asked what she packed. She mentioned a dress, some walking clothes, comfy stuff. I told her to come with me. Back in our bedroom, I played the video again, her, wearing the white lace lingerie I gave her last Valentine's Day. The one she had never worn for me. Not once, not even on that romantic weekend we'd spent together. You wore that for him, I said. But for me? You packed your Donald Duck t-shirt. Hannah looked like someone had just kicked the air out of her chest. If I didn't love you, we wouldn't be in this house. If you weren't special to me, I wouldn't have married you, I said. And yet you dressed up for him, got your hair done, makeup, the whole 9 yards. You made it an event. You never do that for me anymore. She burst into tears again, trying to say it wasn't what it looked like. That she still loved me more than anything. That she didn't want to do it. But I was numb. I sat on the bed, staring at her, unsure what to do next. Finally, I said, I'm calling Edward and Samantha. We're going to talk. Her eyes widened. As I picked up the phone and made the call, she got the door for the Chinese delivery. I forced myself to eat, even though my stomach felt like it was tied in knots. Hannah picked at her food. She looked like a ghost. At 7:15, the doorbell rang. I told Hannah, I don't think you know everything that's going on here. She nodded nervously. When Edward and Samantha walked in, they smiled like everything was normal. But I saw the glance they shared with Hannah, something unspoken passed between them. Edward gave her a look that made me want to break something. Hannah looked down, visibly shaken. We sat in the living room. I let them settle in before saying much. I made small talk about the home monitoring system I had been building. I mentioned how impressive the video quality was. That got Edward's attention. Eventually, I asked Samantha, why'd you push so hard for this to happen? She blinked. I'm sorry. Why'd you go out of your way to make sure that little note got paid off? Edward choked on his drink. I turned to him. I get that you've always been a flirt, but this seemed personal. I watched both women closely. Samantha started tapping her foot. You two have a bit of a reputation, I said. Key parties, couple swaps, that kind of thing. They both flinched. I laid it out plain. You've been in a key club. Every Friday night, different couples meet up, drop their house keys into a bowl. Wives go home and wait. Husbands pick keys at random. New partners for the weekend. The room went silent. Hannah stared at me in disbelief. Samantha smirked, not even trying to hide it. Edward looked away, embarrassed. I continued, you two being close to us. People assumed we were part of it too. Men were interested in Hannah, not just Edward. I turned to my wife. There's one more thing you need to know about the guy you slept with last night, I said, voice steady, jaw tight. Her face went white again. I looked at Edward and mentioned his so-called reputation in their group. That wiped the grin off Hannah's face. Her cheeks went crimson as she dropped her head into her hands. But when I caught Edward's expression, smug, proud of himself, it lit something up inside me. I knew I was going to have to deal with him before the night was over. I explained to the group what I had learned. In their little circle of house-swapping couples, Edward was seen as the top pick. Women actually hoped they would get his key for the weekend. I turned and said it plain. Hannah had already gotten the grand prize. Edward's grin grew wider. Samantha, sitting quietly, glanced sideways at Hannah and smirked. Hannah looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. I sat back and took a long pull from my drink. The bitterness of the tonic water fit the mood just right. No one said anything. The room was heavy. After a while, Samantha finally broke the silence. She started talking about how their arrangement kept their marriage fun and exciting. According to her, it was a way to avoid getting bored. She claimed that opening up their marriages brought them closer together and even helped in the bedroom. Edward just kept nodding, clearly believing every word. Samantha looked at me and said that maybe Hannah and I could benefit too. She told us there was no pressure, of course, but if we ever wanted to try it, they'd be there waiting. I thanked her for being honest, but I shut it down right there. I made it clear I had no interest in partner-swapping games. I said Hannah and I were creative and smart enough to figure things out on our own. I believed in loyalty, and that was non-negotiable. Then my tone shifted. I said there was something more important we needed to talk about, Edward's lack of protection. With Hannah carrying our child, that was serious business. She'd need to get tested right away for infections, and until she got a clean bill of health, I would not be touching her. Period. The betrayal burned. I told them all that we would no longer be spending time together as couples. I was done. I stood up, walked over to the television, and ejected the USB drive with the video. I handed it to Hannah. Without a word, she grabbed some of that day's unopened newspaper, lit it with a match, and dropped the drive into the flames of the fireplace. We both watched it burn until it was gone. When I turned back, Edward and Samantha were both unconscious. I told Hannah the chemical had done its job. Then I picked up the phone and called Garcia. 3 hours later, just before 11 at night, the doorbell rang. I let Garcia in and pointed at the unconscious pair. "They're ready," I said. Garcia asked if I had anything else for him. I nodded and pointed toward the bodies. He stepped outside, returned with 2 men, and they started lifting Samantha first. As they moved toward Edward, I stopped them. "Put him down for a second," I said. "There's something I need to do." I went upstairs and grabbed a baseball bat. Garcia nodded when I came back. "I want to take a few swings," I told him. They laid Edward out. I aimed for the soft spots, knees, ankles, other places he'd remember if he ever woke up. I wanted to hear him scream, but he was still out cold. They carried him off. Garcia paused at the door to thank me. I just said it was no trouble. Hannah hadn't moved. She was frozen in place, watching in disbelief. She finally stepped forward and asked what was going to happen to them. I told her they were heading to Mexico to help medical students practice. She was horrified. "What if someone goes looking for them?" she asked. I told her not to worry. Garcia was thorough. And frankly, I did not care what she felt about it anymore. They were gone. It had to be done. Then I reminded her of something I had told her earlier. The idea that we might stay together, might rebuild? That was a lie. First thing in the morning, we were going to get a paternity test. If the baby was mine, I would support the birth and be in our child's life. But our marriage? That was over. She would not take another man until our son was 10 years old. If she did, she would regret it. We would file for divorce tomorrow. She could keep the house, and I would provide for her until she got back on her feet. Hannah nodded slowly, still stunned. I turned away. "I didn't even know I was capable of all this," I muttered. The next day, we did exactly what I said. We filed the divorce papers, and 3 weeks later, the DNA results came in. The baby was mine. A few months later, our son was born. I was there. I held him. I loved him from the second I saw him. I stayed involved. I visited, paid support, and made sure he had what he needed. I never let myself fall back into anything with Hannah, not even close. She kept her word. She avoided men, kept her head down, and focused on being a mother. I did not date anyone during those early years. I gave my son everything I had. That boy saved what was left of me.